Yeah, this dude is heliocentric. He's really entertaining. He's been doing a lot of stuff recently about Jehovah's Witnesses. He went to a memorial service. He's never been affiliated with Jehovah's Witnesses. I want to see what he had to say about the memorial, and we'll talk about what it is in a minute. Dude's got a beautiful piano back there.
Asylum. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another thrilling episode of Atheist Mother Dang Church Audit. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist, and tonight I celebrated a memorial service of the death of our Lord with our friends, the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I don't usually get to partake of the Eucharist whenever I go into any of the churches that I go into.
Right, Eucharist is the emblems, right, or whatever, like the cracker and the juice, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Jehovah's Witnesses do not eat those things or drink those things. Only 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses throughout history, of whom there are a few thousand around today. I've seen it happen once, but it's very, very rare that you'll see a Jehovah's Witness drink the wine and eat the crackers.
And tonight was no exception. However, it was a little bit weird because nobody else took communion while I was there. So in protest of that, I'm not taking communion right now, but I am going to eat crackers and drink wine.
You're gonna eat some old Cheez-Its, huh? Yeah, I remember eating Cheez-Its. There's one video on my channel where I went through a bunch of different types of communion and I tried all of them. And apparently my cat loved one of the Cheez-It types.
And think about the sacrifice of Jesus, and that's going to be the next best thing. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I get very animated about this shit, and I know that I'm doing like a YouTube shtick right now, but all this is very real. I hate the Watchtower. I hate this doctrinal system. I hate this theology very, very much. I love these people, and I will continue to praise how sweet and kind these people are. But this system, I hate it. It is evil. It is bad and stupid and dumb, and I hate it. And oh God, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to tone it down a bit, but I know I won't be able to. I'm gonna be bitching by the end of this episode, guaranteed. It is April 12th. It is a Saturday, and I got word from a kind stranger on the internet that tonight is the Jehovah's Witness memorial service, which is their equivalent of Easter. You might recall that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate holidays. Easter is included in that. The only kind of quasi holiday that they have is the one that they are told by Jesus to commemorate.
And it's obviously, as you said, quasi. It's not even a holiday. They call it a holiday. It's not. It's just where you go to the Kingdom Hall after sundown on this one day, on Thursday or Friday or whatever it is, and you watch people pass these plates around and you listen to a sermon for about an hour. That's it. And then you go home. They don't give gifts to each other. They don't nothing. That's it. By the way, guys, check out my new shop, owenmorgan.com/shop. I have a bunch of really cool designs on there.
And because the Jehovah's Witnesses are biblical literalists on steroids, they don't see any mandate in the Bible to celebrate Easter. However, they do see an injunction to come and remember the death of Jesus. And I've been to, I don't know, half a dozen Kingdom Hall services and meetings up to this point, and I think that maybe this one has been the most illuminating because it is by far the most hyped. They send out brochures, they knock on your door, they tell you to invite your friends and family. It is
they do a big push. It's called a campaign. They do a campaign leading up to the memorial where they all go out, knock on everyone's door. They're supposed to try to hit every single door in the territory to invite them to the memorial. Everybody, even disfellowshipped people, non-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, anyone even slightly affiliated with the organization should go. They won't talk to you when you go, if you're disfellowshipped, but you should be there. And they generally gauge people's interest and their size as a religion based on how many people show up to the memorial. Like how many people are connected even a little bit
A very big deal. Come to the memorial service. Remember the death of Jesus with us.
Hello. I'm happy to invite you to a special event that will be attended by millions of people. It's the anniversary of Jesus' death. This invitation shows the time and location of the event in our area.
God, it's so plastic and fake, right? It's painful.
And the fact that it is the most lackluster, banal service of any religious group that I've ever been to speaks volumes. So for this service, I decided to drive way out of my way. I drove way out into the sticks, like an hour north of Raleigh.
Damn.
To go out to this, new Kingdom Hall that I've never been to before. And it was interesting. I texted Jake from Alt Worldly and asked him do you have any tips for going to the memorial service? And he was like, get there early, like an hour early. And I was like, WTF? No, that's crazy. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, totally. That's good advice. And in fact, it's advice I wouldn't have thought of. Try to, get there to hang out with people and stuff. Because a lot of the time after the memorial, they're trying to get everyone's cars out of the way because they have to pack them in like sardines and stuff. So before the memorial is the best time to talk, I guess.
I still got there 40 minutes early, and 40 minutes before the service started, there were people outside directing traffic. Like they had a whole team. I also asked Jake, what are the odds that I get recognized and kicked out? And he was like, 0%.
Really? I don't know. I would think that's likely.
Because even if somebody had watched my videos, then it's like mutually assured destruction, because then, they would have to run to the elders and say, hey, there's a guy who makes anti-JW videos here in today's service.
I don't know.
And their immediate question...
Well, he's welcome anyway. He's welcome to be there anyway. Everyone is welcome, even people that are critical of the religion. It's a mandate from Jesus, and Jehovah's Witnesses have no place to prevent people from following Jesus' laws, basically, is their idea. So even if you're critical, if you want to come, then you can come. You might have to sit in the back in a confined room and have special whatevers if they can't trust you to not shout out or something, but you'll be welcome there, I think.
To him would be, why were you watching anti-JW videos? And then he would get in trouble.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay, cool. So I walk into the Kingdom Hall 40 minutes before the service starts, and it's bumping. There's a lot of people there. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to feel a little excited at this point. Ooh, wow, maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses are gonna spice it up this time. Let's go. Maybe there's actually gonna be some theological depth, or some mystery, or reverence. Ooh. I make my pit stop into the bathroom and take a leak, and hear the organ music, or the MIDI
full orchestra. Yeah, it's orchestral music.
Orchestral music. It's still bad, man. It's still just bad. What is good is that this Kingdom Hall, like every other that I've been to, is filled with kind people. And I know that my ex-JW friends will come out of the woodwork and be very quick to point out hey, this is love bombing. They're coached on how to do this. And
no. They're super nice. I agree. I think that they're good people. Uniquely in Christianity, by and large, they're good people not because they fear going to hell, but because they want to be good people, because they believe that it's virtuous to be a good person. They will care about people for the sake of it. You put money on a table, or you put your wallet down on a table, got money in it. You don't have to count the money to know that they're not going to take it. They're not going to take any of it. They're not doing it out of fear. They're doing it because they really believe that's the thing to do. So yeah, there is a love bombing aspect to it, absolutely, especially at the Kingdom Hall, but not entirely. I agree with heliocentric here.
Even still, it just, I don't know. I'm got by it every time. As a person who, his whole shtick is visiting cults, I'm still susceptible to it. And even knowing how sinister some elements of this cult are, it's still difficult for me to villainize these people who are shaking my hand and asking me about my backstory.
I don't think they're villains. I don't believe Jehovah's Witnesses are villains. I believe the governing body and the organizational hierarchy are villains. And you know what? Even those people are true believers by and large. It's just that they're doing like villainous, evil shit, hurting people for no reason is my problem.
And man, the thing that really got me was I sat next to, a few like middle schoolers, and it was these like young, ambitious middle school boys. And, the guy on my right, he was wearing a 3-piece suit, and he was like, "Sir, would you like me to help you navigate the JW app?"
Dude, I love 3-piece suits. I'm such a fan. I wore 3-piece suits too when I had a vest and everything. I was dapper as a motherfucker.
Like, Jamal, you sweetheart, yeah. And there was a part of me that felt like, man, this is actually like so sweet. Little man is in 6th grade and he's passionate about his faith and, sharing it with the newbie on the block. Aw. Anyways, I'm there at night for the memorial.
I mean, when you really think about it, in the cold light of day, that's really fucked up though, isn't it? That they have 6-year-olds so invested in this whole thing that they're going around, they already know exactly what to say and what to do, how to help outsiders and everything to try to drag them into the religion. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, man.
Memorial service. And the ugliness of the Kingdom Hall is especially accentuated tonight because it's an evening service. It's already past sunset. So it's night outside, and inside the Kingdom Hall, the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead just makes you feel like you're in an insane asylum. I feel like I'm a frog on a dissection table when I walk into a Kingdom Hall, especially at night. Like, I'm literally staring into my key light right now, and I feel like that's doing less damage to my circadian rhythm than the overhead lighting in a Kingdom Hall.
Oh, and you know what? I'm going to put this closer to the beginning because I find it fascinating. Sometimes it's a mandate to pass the wine around, pass the bread around, to quote unquote observe, Jesus' death or whatever. If you don't have anybody to pass it around with, then you need to make it or buy it and set it on a plate and in a cup for a few minutes and sit there and meditate on God with it in front of you. Everybody, every single person, everyone, including people in prison. And that's where it gets fascinating. I know you're asking yourself, how does somebody in prison do this? And there's an answer. Do they have to use toilet wine? The answer is yes. Possibly. Juice, like grape juice and bread, will suffice. Basically, it's best efforts. They expect your best efforts. Well, let me rephrase. Jesus expects your best efforts. If those efforts weren't best enough, then, that may be it. Lights out for you at the end. But by and large, they kind of promote this idea that God respects our best efforts. He'll only put us through what we can bear, so on and so forth. So people may choose to get toilet wine, actually, in prison. They were faced with this conundrum in World War II, in concentration camps, and in other, it's always happening basically all around the world. So
it's at about that time that the meeting starts. They start with a warm introduction and then jump straight into the song. A single, solitary song. And to my surprise, it was actually a pretty banging cover of some Newsboys.
We believe in God.
No, it is not.
The Father.
I'm kidding, obviously. It was terrible. So then after the music, they gave the talk, the holy grail of this whole thing. And to set the stage for this, like they've been preparing 4 months. The memorial of Jesus' death. It's their one holiday. Sound the alarm, ring the bell, get everyone in the neighborhood to come down. Freaking bribe people if you have to. Just get everyone here for this.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
Super important service. And the service is literally not a service. It's not it's like not a sermon. It's a systematic theology on their stupid doctrine on how nobody should be taking the communion that they're about to present. So rather than emphasize...
The reason they do that is because they know they have people there that they won't see again for the rest of the year or whatever. And now is their opportunity to try to get them, to convince them to come back and everything. So they're trying to describe to the audience how super regular they are and how they're not odd at all, and they're totally not a cult, and they're just loving Jesus like a young boy should, that type of deal.
and stress the beauty of the incarnation. They don't believe in the incarnation because they don't believe that Jesus is God. But rather than stress the beauty of Christ's sacrifice and his unending love for us and the grace of God, none of that is there. Instead, it is turn to this verse. We read it. Now keep that in the back of your mind. Now turn to this verse.
Yep, that's how they do it. I found that I do structure my videos in a similar way. I don't script my stuff, but, you know, I will, like, kind of construct what I want it to be about, like, on the fly. And I'll say, now keep that in the back of your head for a minute. That's funny. I never thought about that.
Fascinating. Now turn to this verse. Doesn't that sound a lot like the previous verse? They treat the Bible as though it is a legal document, and they use the individual passages that they're reading from like points in a syllogism. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 11. Premise A. And
They totally do that. He's absolutely right. I never thought about it.
let me oh god, okay. Let me explain the theological point that they are making. Because they don't really give a shit about Jesus' sacrifice. They don't really give a shit about the penal substitutionary atonement that is taking place. Instead, what they really, really care about is proving that they are doing it correctly, that they are doing it by the book. Because if there's one thing that Jehovah's Witnesses are obsessed with, it is proving that they know the Bible and they are living according to the Bible.
Yeah, and they want to do things exact. They don't want to get anything wrong in any way, shape, or form, because getting something wrong could mean your eternal death. Like, even little things like, should you make toilet wine, if you can, in prison, rather than getting grape juice from, like, the cafeteria or whatever? You may want to get grape juice, you may want to get toilet wine, but your eternal life does absolutely depend on that. You know, they can't just put their best efforts in. Their best efforts have to be really their best. Like, take it as far as humanly possible. Make it as extreme as they can, because that might be what God expects, and we just don't know because he's not here to tell us, you know?
The Bible, as though it were totally devoid of any sort of historical or literary context. Just rip it out, doesn't matter, because the text is all we need. We have the divine holy text, and every jot and tittle is from God himself, and that's all you need. And so the entire service is them parsing through the Bible in order to prove this very obscure, very obtuse theological point that they have. And that theological point is the idea of a two-class system. Now, I'm still a little bit hazy on this, so XJDubs, please correct me. But the gist of this, from what I can gather, is that there are two classes of saved people in the Jehovah's Witness theology.
They don't use the word saved, but yes.
There is the earthly class, and then there is the heavenly class, or the anointed class.
Yep.
The earthly class refers to Jehovah's Witnesses who will be resurrected. They're super good, they're dandy, they're legit, they're great. However, the super duper spiritual elite legit Jehovah's Witnesses are the anointed class.
It's not something that you can attain through works or anything. It's just like God has picked you, and that's it. That's all there is to it. And you know that you're picked because you know, and that's it. If there's ever any doubt in your mind, then you're not anointed. And it's pretty clear that there have been, like, some people that thought they were anointed but were not anointed, and that happens with Jehovah's Witnesses, and they know about it, and it's not like a secret or anything. But generally speaking, they just accept it if you say that you're anointed. You don't need to discuss this with anybody ahead of time. You don't need to, you know, do anything extra special. You don't need to get permission. You're anointed. That's it.
And those are the 144,000.
They also don't have a special role in the organization aside from just being anointed. However, everybody in, like, their compound that does all of the writing and everything else, most of those people are anointed, not all of them. The leadership must be anointed. The governing body, they are all anointed. Their hearts are, quote unquote, more in tune with God's heart than other people. And that's what uniquely qualifies them to speak on, you know, religious matters or whatever. Not that they hear the voice of God. They explicitly say that anointed people do not hear the voice of God, but they're more in tune with God's heart than others.
That are talked about in Revelation. And the entire service is literally just to prove this theological point that they want to make, and that is that the only people who should take communion are members of the 144,000, the anointed class. However, that's weird because they are also under the assumption that you ought to be celebrating the communion service every year, and then just the majority of people ought not to be taking communion. This is the dumbest thing, man. It is so stupid. So the entire hubbub.
Yeah, I think the problem is the use of the word observance. I think the Bible uses the word observe or observe this or whatever, and Jehovah's Witnesses took that to mean not that they should do this thing, eat the bread and the wine, but they should watch other people do this thing, basically.
Around this is just the fact that they are presenting communion, and it looks exactly like normal Protestant communion. They have a little plate with a whole bunch of little bread wafers on it, and
Yeah, during the pandemic, people they couldn't hold the memorial in person because it was immediately after the pandemic started. So in rural areas, they made arrangements to broadcast it on TV, broadcast it on TV, and in even more rural areas, they made arrangements to broadcast it on the radio. And even more rural than that, the congregation elders made sure that everybody had a recording of the memorial talk that was done like the day before or whatever, or the week before. And they would play that after sundown. And they had on their website today, they have instructions for how to make wine that it has no additives and unleavened bread. It's pretty straightforward. So if you're doing this alone, you make all that shit yourself.
they have a glass of wine that they pass around. So the song and dance that's done is you sit in your chair. The ushers will come along and they'll pass the bread and they'll pass the wine. And what do? You take the wine, you pass it to your right, and you take the bread and you pass it to their right. And what does the person to your right do? Well, they take the wine and they pass it to their right. They take the bread and they pass it to their right. And what does the person to his right do? Well, they take the wine and they pass it to their right, and they take the bread and they pass it. And
yeah, ushers stand on each side of the aisles because the chairs are lined up, you know, side to side in the Kingdom Hall, and they stand on each side and they pass it down, and then the usher on that end passes it down, and they just keep doing that. And then the ushers sit down, and somebody comes up and passes it to all of the ushers because they must have it passed to them intentionally. Basically giving everybody an opportunity to eat of the bread and drink from the wine if they're anointed. Everyone needs that opportunity no matter what. Same with the elder on the stage. He is given an opportunity to eat it by having it passed to him and then passing it back.
nobody takes communion. Because the only people who are allowed to take communion are members of the 144,000. And who are the members of the 144,000? Well, nobody knows, you know. The people probably know.
Fascinatingly, you can look at statistics. Hang on. Here you go. Memorial partakers since 1948. If you look real closely here, there's a dip here. 1970, there's a jump from 70 to 73, and then a drop off because people believed the end was here in 1975. They had this whole end times prediction for 1975, and it fell flat. They even had a catchphrase, stay alive to 75, and nothing happened. So people were joining and becoming anointed leading up to 75, and then it failed. Massive drop off. And then if you notice, 2016, massive jump because people believed the end was here because Trump was becoming president. And then it kind of leveled off, kept climbing through his administration. It started to climb more slowly. It dropped down, climbed slowly in 2021 after Biden took office. And then 2024 started to jump again when Trump was running. That's fascinating, right? So here's the bottom line with it. There have absolutely been more than 144,000 people who claim to be anointed and have been recognized as anointed by Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't know exactly who's anointed and who isn't because, you know, God's not telling Toni Morris, governing body member, for example, that Owen Morgan is not anointed. He doesn't have that information. So they just assume everyone who says they're anointed is anointed and go from there. That's pretty much it.
The super holy spiritual elite who the Holy Spirit has whispered into their heart, they know. Oh gosh. So basically at that congregation, there were 2 people who took communion. And it's literally just...
Damn, really? Like I said, I've only ever seen that a total of once, and I was like 6.
It's some dude who's like, yeah, no, I think that's me. So the distinction between the 144,000 and the earthly class are that the 144,000 are going to be those who rule and reign with Christ. You know, they're the spiritual elites.
They're going to be raptured to heaven when the end comes, and they're going to be given heaven swords, and they're going to cut people down. They're going to come back to earth during Armageddon and cut people down, basically, that they didn't like.
All the other Jehovah's Witnesses in the world, you know, they're still like saved and they're going to be living in paradise for forever, but they're not the guys, you know, they're not the governing body of heaven, so to speak. And so if you rewind literally about a year to my very first Jehovah's Witness video, I said back then that the 144,000 doctrine was either revised or totally done away with. And I had a lot of ex-JWs chime in and say, no, this has always been the doctrine.
Yeah, that's always been the doctrine. It has not been revised to my knowledge. And I wrote a book about it recently, like in the past couple of years, so.
And I was right. So to be fair to them as well, this has been the doctrine for years and years and years and years and years. However, it was not always the Watchtower's doctrine.
Oh, you're talking about like, yeah, okay. You're talking about like in 1920, yeah. But it's been their doctrine since like 1975 I think it changed under Joseph Rutherford in the 30s, in the 30s.
Essentially, here's what happened. When Charles Taze Russell came on the scene in the 1800s, he was going around preaching that there was only going to be 144,000 people saved. And him and all, 6 of his buddies were like, yeah, only 144,000. You said it, preacher. And then, the years went on and they gathered more and more members. And then, oh, shit, boss, we have like 2 million members. Fuck, what do we do? Shit, fuck. And so they came up.
That's funny. I like it.
With this theology in order to account for their rapidly growing numbers. They had a 2-tier system implemented so that they didn't say like the majority of our congregants aren't actually going to go to heaven. And then the same thing with this very bizarre communion service. This wasn't always how it was for decades.
I thought he meant it changed in the past like 30 years. No, this is like, it's always how it's been for Jehovah's Witnesses. Before Jehovah's Witnesses, before 1933 or so, they were called the Bible students. And it's not a distinction. It's not a meaningless distinction. It was a religious split, like the Protestant split. There was a power struggle. They lost 1/7 of their membership total. A new leader formed and ran the Bible students as a new organization. Rutherford did a hostile takeover of the organization owned by the Bible students, the Watchtower Society. He did a hostile takeover of it and renamed it Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Bible students had to form a new organization. And they did. So Bible students had different beliefs about it under Charles Taze Russell than Jehovah's Witnesses do under Joseph Rutherford. So I guess we're both right.
They just took communion like other Protestant Christians. But then Judge Rutherford in the 1930s presents this idea at a convention and basically says, hey, there's a 2-tier system now. And even though everyone has been taking communion, from now on, the only people who get to take communion are the spiritually elite, the anointed ones. And of course, the Watchtower has greatly suppressed this literature. But the basic gist of it is that the only people who can take communion now are those of the 144,000 class. And how do you know if you're a part of the 144,000? You just have kind of a gut feeling. But it's super weird and counterintuitive because the only people who actually take communion are the people who are audacious and, arrogant enough to think that they are so spiritual that they will be among the 144,000 that Christ chose from every believer throughout history. You can do the math on that, right?
Yeah, like the apostles are anointed. Like Paul, he's anointed. He will be in heaven with Jesus or whatever. And as soon as they die, they go right to heaven. It's not like they have to wait, to my knowledge. I believe they're just raptured there instantly, pretty much.
So okay, there's only 144,000 spots. You got the 12 disciples. You got, the what is it, 13 current governing body members, however many. So you're doing some quick math and it's yeah, look at me. I'm the holiest person in my kingdom hall. Yeah, I'm one of the 144,000. And so you take the communion and then everyone in the congregation is you dick. And ironically, in what is supposed to be a commemoration of the sacrifice of Jesus, has become a spiritual dick measuring contest that is so laughably absurd that I just...
Brother, we're not supposed to compare each other's spirituality. We are all serving God together.
It's just so dumb. It's so stupid. And just the more I study this sect, it feels like all of the insanity of it is just these people doubling down on really stupid, nonsensical interpretations of the Bible.
Well, doubling down on fuck-ups that they've objectively made in the past. Claiming that the end would come in 1975. Claiming that only 144,000 would come or would be raptured to heaven in 1914, and then it didn't happen. And now they have to make up this whole story to explain why it didn't happen, and they were right all along. Yeah, they're doubling down on fuck-ups.
And it's not because they're stupid. It's because they're smart.
No, it's because the leadership, the people that make these prophecies are dumb as dog shit. And didn't learn from the other 16 guys that did the exact same thing. And they have to whip up this explanation. And the other Jehovah's Witnesses believe in this religion so deeply that they'll buy anything that they're saying.
People invest their lives into reading the Bible, but their basic presupposition is stupid. The Bible is not a book that was delivered by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. It was a book written by people. If you want to say that we were inspired by the Holy Spirit, that's fine. But it has context. And so
Yeah, that's one of the things Jehovah's Witnesses do a lot. They strip the context completely. They find a verse from here, a verse from there, and they combine them into a new verse, and it leads to a completely different interpretation of everything. The day-year principle. They believe that the book of Numbers says a day is as a year in the perception of God or whatever, and they use that verse to justify a belief that some verse in the book of Daniel says that 2,300 days will pass before the temple, blah, blah, blah. And that means 2,300 years will pass before this thing. And the book of Revelation says that. And they just combine all of this shit together and squish verses together that don't belong next to each other at all. And formulate this big, ridiculous prophecy off of all of that trash. And it's at that point, you're not even reading the Bible. You're reading an entirely different book that you've just compiled,
They'll look at the Bible and they'll say well, based on our calculations, it's very apparent that, the anointed class is supposed to take communion, but the earthly class is not. Meanwhile, nobody in the early church had any conception of this. All early Christian communities took communion. So yeah, you can run your theological calculus all you want, but it just doesn't make sense. Ignatius of Antioch, literally the disciple of Jesus, you think that guy didn't understand communion? So I think the doctrine is stupid, but I think what's worse is just the idea that like, this is the best thing you guys have to offer. You spent so much time and energy begging people to come to this, and it's laughably stupid. You spent all this time and money and energy inviting all these people to it, and it's so shallow. The entire service is spent doing hermeneutic gymnastics rather than focusing on Jesus. How did you get here? And I always have to remind people, I'm an atheist.
By the way, I looked this word up because I hadn't heard it. Hermeneutics. It just means Bible interpretation, pretty much. It's the study of Bible interpretation.
If these people were heretics, I wouldn't even care. It's not that they deny the Trinity. It's not that they have a weird conception of who Jesus is. It's that nothing about this is good or deep or rich or theologically meaningful. It's as deep as a mud puddle and rich as tree bark. And I spent the entire service looking around at these people. And I'm sitting next to my new friend, this new, young, ambitious sixth grader. And he
Jesus, dude.
keeps, nudging me on the shoulder. And he's like, yeah. Like, look at this verse. Isn't it awesome? And I'm looking out on all these other people, and, they are so polite, and they're kind, and they're sitting down, and they're paying perfect attention to the speaker. They're not scrolling on their phones. They're not distracted.
Oh, that is super forbidden. Never, ever pull your phone out at a meeting unless you're looking at a Bible verse on the app or something.
They're not, counting sheep in their head. They are listening and attentive.
I don't know. I counted sheep in my head pretty often. And when that happened, from time to time, I fall asleep, and my dad would draw, like, mustaches on my face. He got in some deep shit for that one.
And I know that outside the Kingdom Hall, they are barred from the vast majority of entertainment. They don't really watch movies. They don't listen to secular music. Video games are kind of taboo. Hell, even sports can become an idol. You got to keep that on check. They are so spiritually deprived that
Bro, like, I knew a guy named Barry who was an artist, and he sold paintings before becoming a Jehovah's Witness. Beautiful paintings. He was very, very skilled, had a degree in it, and was like teaching people and stuff. And he quit art entirely, refused to draw. When they were in the, when they were in like field service and door knocking, on occasion you would need to like draw a little map for somebody to show them like which houses they wanted him to go to. He wouldn't even do that because he didn't want to get pulled into art. And like, again, he loved it so much that he put it above Jehovah. He felt. It is so deeply sad, dude. These people cannot just live their lives and be normal human beings. It's constantly about Jehovah.
that this sermon, which honestly sounds more like a bar exam than an actual edifying homily, is somehow emotionally and spiritually edifying to them. And it's crazy to me. I know in actuality, behind closed doors, they're reprimanded if they don't pay attention. But ultimately, it's like they're not able to have fun or enjoyment or satisfaction outside the church. And then inside the church, this is all they get. And
it's a test of will. Are you going to be willing to live an absolutely miserable life until the end of your days for the possibility of making it into the new system? It could come at any second, so it's not like you can, worship or just do whatever you want now and then worship God when the end comes. It could come now for all you know, and then you're kind of effed in the A, if you will. It's so sad. It is so incredibly sad. My mom, has wasted her entire life and her relationship with all of her kids. Wasted it on Jehovah's Witnesses. On and off, back and forth. Am I going to talk to them? Am I not going to talk to them? And, that shit destroyed my connection to her because she wouldn't just I'd be talking to her and we'd be fine. And then out of nowhere, suddenly, she would refuse to respond to my text messages or my phone calls or anything for 6 months or even a year or longer because she suddenly got a bout of spirituality. Decided she wanted to be a quote-unquote good person again. And being a good person necessitates cutting me off, cutting me out of her life entirely. Last time I spoke to my mom, time before last I spoke to her, I said I didn't want to talk to her again ever because this on and off shit is too much for me. I'm cutting the tie now. I'm done. I don't want to see her again ever. And like, supposedly she cried over that and she's just broken up over it and it was terrible and she didn't know how to handle it and everything. And years go by and I told my kid, you know, my mom, your grandma's not going to be here forever. And so if you want to talk to grandma and know her, then you should probably message her sooner rather than later. I don't have any interest in doing it, but if you want to, then you should. So my kid messages my mom and, you know, they meet up and hang out with each other, whatever. And my mom keeps pushing to talk to me again. She says, can I have your address? He used to love like maple candy. I want to send him some maple candy. And she'd say, you know, she would come to New York City. She'd be like, I'm right outside your house. Will you come down and talk to me? And she'd tell me how sorry she is and everything. And I said, okay. So I went down and I talked to her. It was the first time in like 5 years or something. I decided to talk to her. So sit down and we just chat about whatever. And as I'm walking away, she says, so you're going to talk to me again? And I said, are you going to shun me? And she says, we don't use that word. And I said, well, I do. As long as you don't shun me, then yeah, I'll talk to you. Something happened. I mean, this was like a year ago, maybe somewhere in there. Something happened to my my niece recently, my brother's kid. And my niece's mom messaged me and asked if I could find out if like there's a history of autoimmune diseases or anything in the family. So I said, sure. So I messaged my mom, first time in a while. And I said, is there a history of autoimmune disease in our family? And she said, and she didn't respond. She said nothing. So she's, I believe, back to not talking to me again. I don't know that for sure, but this is the exact reason why I told her I didn't want to see her again until she was in a coffin, because I can't keep going back and forth like this. I can't keep dealing with this shit. So I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't know if I'm going to message her again, block her, not even bother. I don't know. Probably not even bother. But it seems like she's ignoring me again. And I, you know, that's not entirely her. It's partially her. It's partially her fault, but not entirely. It's the religion's fault too.
It is spiritual slop. It is a spiritual slap in the face. The one celebration that you get every year. You don't get a birthday, you don't get Christmas, you don't get Easter. What you get is a communion plate that is passed around and you don't get to take any. You get a reminder of the blood and flesh of Christ, the sacrifice of Jesus, and you don't get any. And the only people who do are the pretentious pricks in your congregation who think they actually deserve it. How did you guys survive this? To my ex-JW friends, how did you make it out of this shit alive?
Don't really have a choice, do you? You just go through whether you want to or not, and you'll look like a train wreck on the other side, but there is no other option.
I can talk to my Catholic or even my ex-Catholic friends and can talk to them about, the nuns were kind of mean when I was growing up. But the beauty of the Eucharist is really what keeps me coming back. Just meditating on the wounds of Christ. That means so much to me, that God loved me this much. And in the Jehovah's Witnesses world, you don't even get that.
There's no upside to being Jehovah's Witness. The only upside is community, the community that you get. But you can get that anywhere, first of all. And second, the community in Jehovah's Witnesses is really piss poor.
I'm just disgusted by this whole thing, man. It is so shitty. So after they pass the communion plates around, after they pass the wine around, and after nobody takes it, they say, and that concludes our memorial service. And I felt sick. I felt angry. Like, this is the first time in recent memory that I remember feeling angry in a religious service. Like, why the fuck did you call me here? What hope did you offer me? What beauty did you extend to me? I'm disgusted by this shit. The only thing that's beautiful here is the people who are trapped in this community who somehow feel like they're surviving. I was there 40 minutes early, and it was bursting at the seams, filled with people who were, hugging and shaking hands. And
that's the only good part of it, community. That's why you're there. That's what you're waiting for. That's what you're trying to get more of. There is no upside to the religion beyond that. None.
That tiny spark of life of, people trying to get along and commune and cooperate. That's got to be all that keeps y'all in this, because it sure as hell isn't the transcendence of it. It sure as hell isn't the readily apparent theological premises. Oh God, and it sure as hell isn't the music. Woof. But I looked at this sea of people and I wondered how many of them are actually just here because this is better than the alternative. You come from a rural town in West Virginia, and the only people who
Bro, that describes me.
aren't addicted to heroin are the people in the Kingdom Hall.
Literally describes me.
Yeah, that's a compelling reason. I get it. The only people that you've seen with nice, warm, smiling faces this week are the people over at the cart passing out Bible literature. That's a compelling reason. I get it. After the talk, the speaker, his name was Chad, he came up and we started talking. And, I commended him on a really articulate speech. He was a good speaker. The contents of his message were hollow and vapid, but
And written by the governing body, effectively. Written by the society. There's no deeper anything. Like, people can't write their own sermons. They can't, say their own thing about it. They can't nothing. There's no creating, your own thoughts on this stuff. It's all from the governing body.
I don't think that's his fault. I think that's the fault of the community, of this theology. And he's seen countless memorial services in his day, and he kind of knows how it's supposed to go. So I shook his hand and we talked for a little while, and he helped me understand, a couple of doctrines, and he seemed like a sweet guy. And then the little man next to me, he ran back to the back of the Kingdom Hall and grabbed me one of these, and
Wait, what was it?
ran back to the back of the Kingdom Hall and grabbed me one of
The silver sword. Yeah.
these and gave it to me. He was so funny, man. He just kept, every part of the service, he would, lean over and he's like, hey, I've got the verse right here. And then
Well, hopefully he finds his way out.
after the service, he was like, oh, let me tell you about this one more feature in the JW app. You know that it has multiple translations, right? Oh, and you can, read the Awake magazine, and you can read the Watchtower magazine. Oh, it's incredible. I just love parsing through it and cross-referencing verses. And that kid was in the 6th grade. And then as I was...
But yeah, your whole personality is about it. Again, when we played Trivial Pursuit, Star Wars Trivial Pursuit, the dude wasn't an elder. He was a ministerial servant, which is one step below elder, like a deacon. And he was trying to become an elder. And the elders told him, you can become an elder, but you need to stop going over to their house and playing Trivial Pursuit, because it looks like you care about Star Wars more than you care about Jehovah. Star Wars was like the dude's passion. He loved it. His whole thing. And he gave it up for Jehovah's Witnesses. Why? There was no reason. Star Wars is not forbidden. He just liked a TV show too much. That's it. You cannot enjoy things in this religion.
leaving, another one of the kids who I, shook his hand on the way in, he pulls me aside and he extends his hand for a handshake. And then he says, 24. And I'm like, he's like, 24. He brought up 24 scripture references in today's talk. Isn't that incredible?
Trying to make it all about the Bible. He's trying to make sure that he knows that it's, they're hyper-focused on how important the Bible is. That's so interesting. What an interesting detail this dude is relaying. Also, somebody says his parents are like turbo Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, we call them physically in, mentally in, PME, as opposed to like physically in but mentally out, or physically out but mentally in. We call them PME, but the really insane ones are ultra PME.
24. And I'm like, he's like, 24. He brought up 24 scripture references in today's talk. Isn't that incredible? We love the Bible. And again, this kid was like 14. And yeah, man, they love their Bible. This is the most vapid, bankrupt religious organization I have ever seen.
For the record, the silver sword, the Jehovah's Witness Bible, is altered. It is not the original words in the Bible. It is not a good source. You should not be using it to do Bible research. It's just not valuable for that.
And I am so sorry for the people who are trapped inside of it. I'm blasting heavy on them today, man. But my message is always, these people need to be loved. These people need to be shown compassion. These people need to be shown grace. Because insofar as I was there today, I see these people overwhelmingly as victims rather than
Oh, absolutely.
victimizers. And I know,
Yeah, the victimizers are the governing body members and the writing staff and stuff. But you know what? Even they are victims.
but there are real victimizers. But the system that has bred theology like this, the system that's bred community like this and scandal like this, it's bigger than any one person. I was talking to my new friend, and he was there in his little three-piece suit, and
Dude, I love three-piece suits so much.
his mom was all bashful, and she was like, "Oh, don't bother him. Come on, sweetie." And I was like, no, he's helping me, better navigate the app, and he's a treasure trove of knowledge. And he was there with his mom, and I don't think that his dad was there. I don't know if his dad's in the picture. And there was
It wouldn't be in the picture if he's not there. Almost guaranteed he's not.
a part of me that was like, maybe I should lean over and just like whisper in this kid's ear and tell him like, "Hey man, this is all bullshit." And I started thinking through the ramifications of that, because it's hard, man. It's damn hard. Let's say that he deconstructs and becomes an agnostic, and he tells his mom, "Well, congratulations, kid. Now you're removed from the congregation." What, at 15? And that causes, insurmountable turmoil in the household. His mom's freaking out and hysterical and trying to, yell at him to come back to Jehovah or whatever. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe I should, bring the mom aside and try to talk her out of this evil cult. And then you can imagine the scenario, well, like, what if the mom wants to leave and the kids don't? This kid's like in middle school and he's super passionate. And
I'll tell you what happens. I know exactly what happened. If the kid leaves, the mom is to shun the child, pass the child off to anybody in the family that she can. It's an unwanted kid now, in effect. The mom may genuinely be hurt by the fact that she can't talk to the kid anymore, have a normal relationship. That may genuinely hurt. But in effect, it's like she doesn't love the kid anymore, and she's trying to offload the kid to anybody she can. The literature says, don't eat with a kid. The kid must eat in their bedroom. They can't sit at the dining room table with everybody else when they eat dinner. They can't discuss certain things around the family. You must fulfill your legal obligations, and that's it. That is what the literature says you should do if your 10-year-old kid is like disfellowshipped, or your 13-year-old kid or whatever. If a mom is disfellowshipped, the kid, and she continues to bring the kids to the meeting, which is, that happens. I knew a woman that happened to. She was disfellowshipped for cheating on her husband, and the kids continue to come. The kids sat in seats further away from her. They didn't sit in the same row. She sat alone in the back of the Kingdom Hall, and her 14-year-old kid, her daughter, sat in another area of the Kingdom Hall, so it didn't rub off on her.
And I can remember being his age and literally pointing a finger and reprimanding the adults in my life for not being more passionate about Jesus. What if his mom came to him and said, "Hey, just want to let you guys know that the Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult and we're leaving"? Can you imagine
That happens all the time. That happened with my brother.
the meltdowns and hysteria that this young kid might have if she tried to pull something like that? So maybe that's not the move either. Or maybe you talk to him as a family and you try to get them all questioning at once. Well, that's ideal, but it's probably not possible. Or maybe you just hope and pray that, as soon as this kid turns 18, as soon as the clock strikes midnight on his birthday, he just realizes that all of this is bullshit and he leaves. And
I didn't realize it was bullshit, but I left when I was 17, and I was disfellowshipped basically on my 18th birthday. And, I lost everything. I was kicked out of my house when I was disfellowshipped. 18th birthday. Didn't set foot in that house ever again. It was pretty bad.
even then, his mom might not talk to him anymore. His brothers might totally disown him. I'm just so repulsed by this whole thing, man. And I want to see these people well, but I know that It's a long and painful journey to get there. The Jehovah's Witnesses love this book. They love it to pieces. And if the author of this book were to walk into a room filled with publishers, the publishers would turn the other direction because they would be too busy parsing chapter and verse to give the author of the book any attention at all. And that just breaks my heart. There is no transcendence. There is no beauty. There is just fear.
Yeah. And yeah, that's it. It's just fear.
And maybe the only beautiful part of this whole thing is just the community element. And, you know, a community of bright, smiling people who deep down are petrified of leaving.
And honestly, like, the community isn't even that good. There are way better communities. Like, the Jehovah's Witness community is full of gossips. It's constantly gossip, gossip, gossip. Oh my God. They cannot help themselves but to gossip about other people all the time.
And that's really shitty. If you're an atheist or you're a Protestant or you're a whatever, I would invite you to go and see this in person, because I think that it's important to feel those tugs on your heartstrings, seeing the nice, smiling, warm faces, and, you know, second guessing everything you think you know about this cult, because it feels different when you actually like sit down and talk to these people. Because it's easy to believe the abuse and, you know, the awfulness of the human condition when you read about it on a webpage, but when you sit down and talk to them, it's like, no, surely not, right? So my name's Jared. I'm an atheist. Go to church.
That was interesting. Cinematically interesting. Like, the cinematography was really interesting, the way that he did all of that. And yeah, it sucks. It absolutely, most definitely does suck. But we're on the outside now, for any XJWs watching, and we can live our lives and be happy and free and do whatever we want. We don't have to worry about any of that stupid shit anymore. Never again. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments.